first feature that we're talking about is called Trip Builder, and it is a really, really exciting enhancement to the way we plan our trips in fleet management, and we think it'll help out a lot of you LTL fleets. So let's dive in. So the Trip Builder workflow involves 3 distinct phases. First, we're going to plan the movement of freight throughout our network by creating freight plans in our existing Revenova customers. Hopefully that sounds familiar. Then we're going to add those freight plans to trip plan segments so that I can assign a driver and a tractor and potentially trailers to it. And then finally, with my trip plan segment all planned out, the third phase is to just execute on that trip plan just as we do today in the fleet management console. So let's get started with phase 1, and that is to plan the movement of freight using our new Plan Freight button in the console. So here in front of you, you can see that I have an unplanned load that I need to execute from Chicago to Indianapolis. And I know that before I actually put this on a truck to Indy, first things first, I'm going to get it back to my terminal in Chicago so that I can plan it on a truck and get it out there. So what I will do is select that load and hit Plan Freight. And once again, existing Revenova customers, hopefully this looks familiar. This is our Freight Plan console. And this is the UI where we can split loads, combine loads, basically design how this load will move by creating individual plannable segments called carrier loads that can then be associated with our trip plan segments in a future phase. So first thing I'm going to do is use the Add Stops section of the top right part of the modal to add my Illinois terminal to L40. Now this is not going to add Markham, Illinois' Illinois terminal to L40 for Indy irrigation. It's going to create a carrier load from Chicago to Illinois so that I can then bring it back to the terminal, and like I said, that'll sort of kick off phase 2 here. So I've added Illinois terminal. It's been added to the UI. I'm going to select it and create a new load. And clicking save is going to convert that existing L40 into a customer load in a freight plan and create L46, which is a carrier load in a freight plan. I'll quickly add the expected delivery date and save. And now for L40, I've completed phase 1 of the process, which is planning at least the first part of how it's going to be moved throughout my network. Now on to phase 2, right? I've got my plannable carrier load, that portion of the customer load that I can now assign to a driver and a tractor. So let's assign it to a driver and a tractor. And in order to do that, I need to use our Trip Builder, which is the new phase of the trip planning process, to combine not only that carrier load L46, but any other loads following that same lane. For example, if I can see here that my Chicago loads going back to the Illinois terminal today all can fit together, I'm going to select them all and hit Plan Trip to open the Trip Builder, right? And now we're in phase 2 of the process. Trip Builder is what allows us to connect those carrier loads that I created in phase 1 to the trip plan segment for execution. So to give you a grand tour of the new Trip Builder UI, at the top you'll see a load summary, which is actually summarizing the number of loads from the loads you selected in the previous page, the weight of those loads, the linear feet of those loads. A little bit long here. We may want to actually see if we can stack or turn some of those pallets. The handling units and the earliest and latest that these loads need to be picked up and delivered. Next, you'll see a couple of shortcuts. We start in custom mode to give you complete control over how you want these loads to be executed. You could select 2 of these loads and put them on segment 1, and then select the other 2 and put them on segment 2. You could, again, add those additional segments and reorder them. You can do whatever you need to do to plan the execution of these loads from within the Trip Builder. But if, for example, you know that one segment is going to encompass all of these selected loads, you can use the one segment multiple loads shortcut. And now all 4 of my selected loads are going to be added to segment 1. Now more on this segment in a second. If, on the other hand, you wanted each segment or each load to go on its own segment, we can do just that. And again, you'll see that design laid out in the trip builder. For this one, I want one driver handling all of these loads, so I'm going to use the one segment multiple loads shortcut, and now I can see that all 4 of those loads are on the segment. Now within the selected loads table, you'll see the load number, the origin, destination, delivery date. This is a configurable field set driven section, so you can choose how you want this to look for your planners as they decide how this freight plan fits into this trip plan. In doing so, you can expand to see the individual stops, and you can see the important contacts, the receiving hours, and again, this section is also configurable based on stop information. And now finally on to the segment itself. Now you'll see what I've done in selecting one segment multiple loads is added all of those stops, L43, 1 pickup, L43, 2 delivery, so on and so forth. All of those stops are now on segment 1 for execution by the same driver and power unit. Now what I can do here is rearrange these stops based on how I want the driver to actually do these pickups. And I know that I don't want him going from pickup to terminal, pickup to terminal, pickup to terminal. So what I'll do is I'll move all of my Illinois terminal stops towards the end of this segment, simply by clicking the arrows to rearrange. Now you'll see the way my segment looks is all 4 of my pickups followed by all 4 of my deliveries. I can also add a start location here if, for example, I know my driver is going to start from the terminal and potentially go back to the terminal at the end. For now, I will just leave a start location of the Illinois terminal. Now when I save, all of these Illinois terminal deliveries will combine into a single delivery, and as a result, we'll see a clear, concise trip plan segment with those 4 pickups and my 1 delivery to Illinois terminal, all on a single carrier load that can now be planned and assigned to a driver and a tractor. And that begins phase 3, right? We execute this trip plan segment just like we do any other trip plan segment from the fleet management console. So as you can see, this feature gives you the ability to consolidate carrier loads, to split loads, to create the execution of these loads throughout your network in any way that fits your business. And then the trip builder is that bridge between the trip plan segment and your freight plan, allowing you to execute on those complex loads with ease. And Bruce, that's a trip builder. It's a really exciting addition to our fall release, and I think our LTL fleets are really going to like it.
Well, I think it's going to simplify the process, and everybody is going to enjoy this. It makes the freight planning much easier to work with.